perfectly fine.
Actually,
You are finding ways not to do things. Mr. Goldkind,
Mr. Tory, you just go around and around and you think these people are going to buy it.
Let's give Mr.
Grandiose
Goldkind a chance.
idea.
Let's give Mr. Goldkind a chance to weigh in briefly here.
So the reason that my campaign is taking off is because I find what you just saw toxic. It doesn't get anything built. It's personalities trying to get elected, but it doesn't serve you. So let me make three very quick points. Mr. Tory says it's his judgment and his confidence. Let me read you a quote from Mr. Tory in 2010 when he says to you, "Trust my judgment." Mr. Tory, quote, talking about Mr. Doug Ford, "He's less of a personality than Rob, but if you're looking for a better run government, Doug Ford is certainly the kind of person you would want." End quote.
Thank you.
So
That was true at the time.
That was the first thing. That's the first thing he's ever said, truthfully.
Things do change over the years, all right.
Things change, and I do, but Mr. Tory, things change, but as a private citizen, and this is point two for me, you also as a private citizen were bold enough, and you were correct, sir, to say that we cannot start talking about gridlock and getting the 70% of people that Mr. Ford said drive. You cannot get traffic moving without having an honest conversation with people about congestion fees and tolls. And I am on this stage to say that if you're a person who has a knee-jerk reaction, as many do, to tolls and congestion fees, the facts are that if you're spending $400 extra a year, which many people say you can't afford, and I get that, you are actually going to save $1,600 a year in time, gas, missed opportunities. These are the facts. And the last thing, Chris, is when Mr. Ford says he saved the vehicle registration tax, which him and his brother are quite rightly able to say, it is a bizarre notion to me in a city when we are all better off together, when somebody who can afford a car can't pay $60, but somebody who takes the TTC and needs a Metro Pass is paying hundreds of dollars more a year. That is not fair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goldkind.
Thank you.
We will move on to the second question here, now that I'm armed with the proper format. The second question goes first to Doug Ford. The question is, how do you intend to lower municipal taxes without cutting essential services?
No, well, we did that already. We saved over $750 million of efficiencies. Friends, let me tell you something. I'd love you to spend a week down there with me. I'd love you to sit on the budget for a week, government management, and look at the waste, not just there, but in all three levels of government. You have a procurement department. You have a fleet department. Wouldn't you figure in a large corporation, at least where I come from, you'd share the synergies. You don't have 12 HR departments and 10 purchasing departments, and the Toronto Police buying their fleet, the city buying their fleet, Toronto Housing buying their fleet, everyone buying their fleet separately. I can guarantee you when I'm mayor, I will merge that together. As KPMG said, looking at synergies, we can save, they actually said it was a couple $100 million. I'll be conservative and say 50, 60 million. We're going to outsource the garbage. As I mentioned, that's $97 million alone right there. We have certain departments in the city, and this is staggering, and I voted against it. I put the motion up. I did everything I could to stop it on budget. We have 4 people reporting into a manager that reports into a supervisor. We have layers of middle managers. Please, folks, when you vote, think who's going to take care of your hard-earned tax dollars. There's one person on this stage that won't be increasing your taxes because, as KPMG just released, we're the most competitive tax market in the world. Not Canada, the entire world. And that didn't happen without having a strong backbone, being able to stand up, not saying yes to everyone. As I always say, you go down there, I get along great personally with each and every councillor. I talk to 4 or 5 councillors a day, even both sides, left and right. But when it comes to council, we get in there, we have healthy debates. And if you sit there and hold their hands and sing Kumbaya, you don't get anything done. When I hear yes, 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 I hear ching, 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 tax, tax, tax. That's what I hear, and I've seen it happen. you have to be able to stand up and be strong for the taxpayers. It's easy for everyone to go down there like a church picnic and get along and spend millions and millions of dollars. The last administration was spending at a rate of $400 million a year compounded. $400 million a year compounded. The Ford administration has spent $8 million. That's what you say when you're watching taxpayers' money. $8 million versus $400 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Ms. Chow, you have 2 minutes here.
Well, yes, I would keep the property tax increase around the rate of inflation, but in the last 4 years, TDC fares have gone up. Recreation fees have gone up for our kids and people that want to drop by and go swimming in their swimming pool that they already paid for back when the swimming pool was opened. Parents have to pay more for the child care fees. So all the user fees have gone up. So this whole notion that I can keep tax low is a myth, because whether it's hydro or water rate, everything have gone up. And that's not fair to the people that use these public services, because some of them can't afford it. Let me tell you what I would do, is that I would not proceed with the $1 billion that Mr. Ford and Mr. Tory wants to spend on the Scarborough subway, because the experts said that we should build the LRT in Scarborough with 7 stops, and it can be done by 2020, and it is fast, it is world-class, it is better services, serving more people. Let's get that done, and then that money that we can save can then be used for many other transit priorities. That's what I would do. You would notice that Mr. Tory still have not told you how much all that tunneling would cost, because each kilometer of tunneling cost $300 million. And when he first started this whole Tory track idea, he said there wouldn't be any tunneling. On top of that, the idea is that you have to borrow all of that money, and he hasn't told you how he's going to pay the interest, how he's going to find that money to even begin to pay the principal. And that's not a responsible way to go.
Thank you, Ms. Chow. Over to you, Mr. Tory, 2 minutes.
Well, I should just say, first of all, in relation to some of Doug's comments about healthy debates, if those are healthy debates you have down there, I'd not want to see the unhealthy ones. You know, I know it's not a church picnic, but nor is it supposed to be sort of armed combat or a circus or some combination thereof. Look, Chris, you asked a question about how we can commit to lowering taxes and still maintain programs. I have specifically not committed to lower taxes. What I have done is I think the kind of balanced approach people would expect, sensible, balanced, accountable approach. I have said that I would keep property tax increases at or below the rate of inflation. What this does, I believe, is it provides a degree of additional money to the city government to maintain and to enhance city services, but at the same time it puts a self-discipline on the city to get on with some of the things. Mr. Ford talked about bringing together various services and so on. You have to ask yourself the question, why hasn't that been done over the last 4 years? I've talked about, I would privatize garbage in the east end of the city, $19 million a year at least in savings and better service. I would bring together the real estate departments in the city, because a lot of it is going to be as well in the course of making sure we have the money through the rate of inflation increase or less in property taxes to enhance services and maintain them, is going to be about instilling in the City Hall a culture of real accountability. And when you look at what goes on, you probably read the story in the National Post about them ripping up the small one, but it just tells you what's going on. They ripped up the sidewalks twice in about a year, and because one part of the city forgot to phone the other part before they did it the first time and put it back together again. There are examples after examples like this. Union Station, now running, I think, $100 million over budget, if not more, and it goes on and on and on. And they're showing disrespect for your money, and they are not instilled there with a culture of accountability. That's what has to be done. That will free up a lot of money that you're already paying in taxes to be put to transit and affordable housing and child care and infrastructure and a whole bunch of other things.
Thank you, Mr. Tory. And finally, Goldkind, 2 minutes on taxes.
Thank you. If you heard Mr. Tory's last answer, which I'm sure you all listened to carefully, it was basically what Mr. Ford says about the gravy train and efficiencies, and we're going to find all this money. I can't be clearer. Everybody who's looked at the city budget, from the city manager to every expert that we've paid to consult, has concluded that no matter how much gravy you think we have and how many efficiencies we can save, it is not there. This city needs new revenue. So to answer your question, Chris, I am the one candidate standing up here. And yes, it's very risky to do it, but I'm passionate about it. I think this city is worth investing in. And for any of you who work in a business, have your own companies, and this is a room with some very hardworking people, you know that when you invest wisely, the same way when Mr. Ford needs a new machine at Deco, he pays for it. When Mr. Tory ran Rogers and they do R&D, they pay for it. Why? Because we're going to make it back. You have 3 people standing on this stage, and it's amazing to me, who are really competing for the title and the competition to be the most progressive, yet most conservative candidate at the same time. You just can't be that person. And Mr. Selly, you wrote a brilliant article yesterday that all talked about, and I appreciate nobody turns to Olivia and says, Olivia, your campaign has some holes. There's insufficient progressivity there. I'm very clear. Very, very clear. I would raise the land transfer tax on homes over $1.1 million. If this city has led to you making success, if this city has led to you making the gain on your house that you have, it's worth paying for. And lastly, here's the difference in philosophy between all of us. Our city is leaking. Our city needs help. These 3 good people would put a bucket under the leak and let the drip, drip, drip go and take the bucket out. I say, let's fix the roof.
Thank you, Mr. Goldkind. We're going to move to 5 minutes of discussion. Mr. Tory had indicated that he had something to say. Could you keep it maybe to 30 seconds?
First of all, Mr. Goldkind, Ari, I think you should be penalized for flattering the moderator in that way. It's shameless. But having said that, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
Do you really honestly believe, whatever reports have been written by the city manager, I've seen the same reports, do you really honestly believe that all of the waste and inefficiency has been taken out of this city government? Do you believe that?
I think it's a great question. Let me answer it the way you know I'm going to. There are always, because you know where this is going, John, there are always going to be ways where we can save. But in a budget of billions and billions, when you can save 10 million here and 15 million here, it's a great talking point, and you win on the Union Station, and this goes over. But that wouldn't pay for a station in your Smart Track plan. So really, John, you knew, and you know as a private citizen, and you and I should be together on this, saying to these good people, we're a city worth investing in, and you know what? It should be the 4 of us showing leadership and saying to all of you, let's get together on this and build the city we can dream of.
Thank you, Mr. Goldkind. Ms. Chow?
Mr. Tory, you still have not told people. Well, I'm asking the 3rd time. I'm sorry. It's a lot of money. It's billions of dollars. Okay? It's billions of dollars. And that's a huge property tax increase, right? Because 1% is only $250 million. He wants to borrow, I don't know how many more billion it is that he wants to borrow right up front. How much money are you planning to borrow in order to start that transit scheme of yours? Because you won't tell us how much.
Mr. Tory?
How much? Because you won't tell us.
The answer as to what amount of money is going to flow through the tax increment financing mechanism put in place, again, by the Government of Ontario, the Finance Minister, Greg Sorbara, saying this was exactly the kind of project it was meant for.
How much money?
The amount of money is a third of $8 billion.
But
$8 billion, I didn't interrupt you. Now, so that's the $8 billion was, by the way, put in place estimating the cost of construction of this project relative to other similar projects in London, which is a much bigger project with a lot more tunneling, and so on, and in Washington, where they're presently doing the same surface express rail. And so the answer is 1/3 of $8 billion. That price includes all of the engineering challenges that will have to be dealt with, because I'm sure not only will there be some underground, as there is in London, England, that will be necessary, but there may be other challenges you confront front as you go along. But the bottom line is, we're going to get this done because this city needs it, because it's urgent, it's a good plan, it's a sound plan, it's an urgent plan, it's a big plan, and we're going to get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Tory. Mr. Ford, Mr. Goldkind, you want to jump in on?
Oh, sure. You have a choice. The $8 billion in trains running down the middle of the street, causing traffic congestion, or 32 kilometers, $9 billion underground. Mr. Tory, it wasn't long ago that you ran for mayor and you said you wouldn't put toll roads in. And then I listened to one of your speeches the other day saying that you were just trying to get political points when he was running. And he believes in toll roads. He believes in raising taxes, retail tax, gas tax. My question is, what tax are you going to raise? Because you have to raise something, because TIFs do not work by themselves. They don't. They've failed in 47 states.
Okay. Mr. Tory?
So you just made my point. All three of you can't have it both ways. You can't say on the one hand that I haven't spelled out how I would pay for the city's share of the Smart Track, and then say that the mechanism I have spelled out you don't agree with. So you have to have it one way or the other. You said you disagree, or you think my method, the tax increment financing, which I didn't invent, but the Government of Ontario put in place specifically for projects like this, you disagree with it. I respect that. But then you can't turn around and say I haven't got a method to pay for it, just because you don't like it. It is a method in many places in the United States.
You're on record first saying that you did it to score political points. You were on record. You said it can't be built.
You've made that point,
It
Mr. Ford.
cannot be built without raising
Mr.
taxes.
Goldkind wants
You're
to intervene.
You can't get a straight answer out of this guy.
Mr. Goldkind.
Yeah.
Very briefly.
So, very briefly, you see an element of what's going on here, but here's the problem. You have Mr. Ford who says, you know, my subways will be red, white, and blue. That doesn't make it true. You have Mr. Tory who says they're going to be free. It's not the trains that are the problem. It's the train of thought. And if Mr. Ford or Mr. Tory would stand on this stage and say, ladies and gentlemen, we need subways, we need Smart Track, but we have to get together and pay a little bit more for them, I think I even would stand here and say, I'll hand out brochures for you and knock on doors. That's the conversation we should be having, and that's why so many people are disappointed that we're not.
Thank you, Mr. Goldkind. Our 5 minutes are up on that topic. We're going to move on to our third question, which goes first to Olivia Chow, who will have 3 minutes. The question is, we have seen a spike in anti-Semitism worldwide, especially in Europe. Fortunately, Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities in the world and is widely considered to be a very safe home for the Jewish people. If elected mayor, what steps would you take to ensure Toronto remains safe and secure for its Jewish community and for all communities in this diverse city? So you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for that question. It's very, very important. That there are several aspects that I want to do. Number one, we need to train our police better. The hate crime unit probably can use a bit more support. And we need to work on our police so that they learn how to deal with people in a different manner, especially those that have mental health issues, for example. We need to train them more. We also need to deal with young people that often get in trouble because they are bored after school and they get recruited by people that are full of hate, whether they are gang members or people that have very simple, hateful ideology. We need to work with young people, whether it's in schools or after-school activities. If you look at those kind of people that gets recruited, often they are young people that don't have opportunity for after-school activities. So crime prevention is very, very important. And that's why in my plan, there's a very key component that says specifically on after-school activities in 40 neighborhoods so that kids would learn how to work with each other, learn a different skill, and then they grow up smart and strong, stay out of trouble, and not be recruited by people that are hateful. One other area, if you're talking about community safety, if I have a little bit more time, is that I believe that education should really we need to teach the teachers like Facing History and Facing Ourselves. That project teach teachers on how to deal with genocide and Holocaust. I helped that organization and supported them to get federal funding, and they are now teaching teachers on how to approach these kind of issues so that young people would learn that anti-Semitism or hate has no place in our world. And those are the strategy that I would use. On community safety, I want to also talk about the number of people that are unfortunately dying because of traffic accidents, because increasingly there are more seniors and kids that are walking. And I have a plan called Target Zero, and that Target Zero deals with lowering speed limits in neighborhood, that if the neighbors want, then we can lower the speed limits in the entire neighborhood, and fixing different intersections so that the most dangerous intersections can then be renovated, retrofitted, so they're a lot safer for everyone, whether the pedestrians or car drivers. So that's a comprehensive view on how to deal with community safety.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chow. Mr. Tory, you have 2 minutes on the subject of community safety.
I don't think there's an easy answer when you said community safety. It's in particular about some of the rising acts of anti-Semitism and so on, and we're seeing this in other areas of the community as well, unfortunately, as affects other groups, and I made reference to that in my opening statement. But, you know, I was thinking about it today because I knew this topic was going to come up, and I was thinking back to the days, and I guess I'm ancient enough, as some in this room are as well, to remember the days when we used to have air raid drills in the schools, and how scary that was. And it made me think about the fact that I think many of the schools, I'm told maybe upwards of half of the schools in the Jewish school system, the Jewish day school system, have had lockdowns this year or lockdown drills. And how frightening that must be for the kids and, for that matter, for the teachers. The same holds true of synagogues in our city needing security. And you know, it doesn't matter whether it's a synagogue or a mosque or a church or a temple or a gurdwara. The bottom line is, I don't think we live in a city where we would need security in those kinds of places, schools or in places of worship. And I think we would, in fact, strongly believe that we shouldn't be living in a city like that. And so I think it starts largely with education. And that means education, yes, of the young, but also of the not so young, because there are still attitudes harbored by people in this city that are attitudes that we have to work and work and work and work to make sure are not part of life in the city. I think it does include, and by the way, I think the vast majority of people have attitudes that are in line with our Canadian values and the way we'd want to live together. I think it also means additional education of the police, both with respect to their responsibility they have, yes, to enforce the law, taking into account as well our profound commitment to free speech, but also just to, you know, cause people to be able to resolve differences in a certain kind of way. And finally, it's not an answer that sort of sounds like it's tangible, but I think there's a lot to be found in the kind of interfaith initiatives that are being undertaken across the city to bring people together and to have them understand each other better. Certainly, when I've had the privilege of going to all these different religious institutions as a candidate, I found that actually the values they all share are very similar to one another, and we need to have more learning in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Tory. Over to you, Mr. Goldkind, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm really going to stay on the focus of this question. I appreciate the candidate over to my left pivoted on it, but let me start with this. Let's talk about the sacred cow that's here. I would start on the issue of anti-Semitism by not having a mayor who refers to us, the people in this room, the Jewish people in this room, with a derogatory name that starts with K. And while Mayor Ford, who has shown a tremendous amount of chutzpah by coming in this room tonight, may get a free pass from everybody else on this stage, I'm a Jewish person. I'm not religious, but the fact that he insulted my religion, whether it was under the influence or not, we cannot have a mayor like that, because that is where it starts. Now, that being said, because I think my whole existence is to call truth to power, I wish Mr. Ford the best of health. He may not have appreciated that, but when you insult a whole people, you are not setting an example for a city. But let me answer the question on a different note too. I think that the Jewish community has been very fortunate to be successful, and that's why the Jewish community is one of the most charitable, caring communities in Toronto and actually around the world. And I think that the best message that we do to make sure of community safety and taking care of our neighbor is being willing to step up to the plate for our neighbor. And this is a community that understands that any disenfranchised community in this city, black, brown, new immigrants, this is a community that stands up, and as mayor, I would make sure we do everything we can to bring Toronto together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldkind. Mr. Ford, you have 2 minutes on this issue.
Well, this is kind of a two-part question here. I'll answer the first part about crime, making the streets safer. We said we were going to hire more police officers. We did the exact same thing as what we said we were going to do, like we have with 98% of our agenda. We have more police officers out on the streets. The other area I'd focus on the police is reallocating existing officers onto Tavis. Tavis is a division of the Toronto Police that focuses on reaching out to youth, dealing with youth, and also reallocate police officers to areas getting involved in the community. I've done that. When I first got elected, I went to a TCHC building up in Rexdale. There was drug dealing, there were shootings. I went right in there and addressed it with the young people, brought them down, and I mentored them. And we need more mentors throughout the city to educate the young people in this city. Now, maybe, Ari, I'm not going to address your comment, but you know something? My doctor, my Jewish doctor, my Jewish dentist, my Jewish lawyer, my Jewish accountant, we've learned, our family, can you please let me finish? Our family
finish, please.
has the utmost respect. Let me finish, please. My family has the utmost respect for the Jewish community, the utmost respect. And we look forward to working with the Jewish community, as we have for the last 4 years. For the last 4 years. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ford. We now have 5 minutes of discussion on this, and I think I might know who might want to go
I do.
first.
And I'll tell you, because I want to take the high road here.
And so do I.
Mr. Ford just said what he did, and he actually just pulled a Ford again. Ford, falsify, overstate, repeat, deny. And I'll tell you this, Mr. Ford, and you know from the other day, you and I had words eye to eye, and I respected it because it was eye to eye and man to man, and I'm good with that. What I didn't hear from you, and I have your brother in the front row staring at me, and that's fine, and I'm good with that because I have a tough day job. I actually didn't hear an apology. I didn't hear an apology from you as the mayor's designate running in his stead, saying to the people of this room, and I'm giving you an easy one here, because I'm going to take the high road. I'm giving you an easy one. I don't want to hear about your lawyer, your doctor. I don't want to hear about that. I want you to say that what your brother said was inexcusable, and it doesn't get washed under the rug.
Okay, what about it, Mr. Ford?
I said to Rob, and Rob knows that, and he has apologized for those statements. I have told him very clearly that it was unacceptable and excusable. I said it very clearly. Not only that, friends, I've said it publicly. This isn't the first time. I've said it publicly numerous times.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Ms. Chow had indicated she wants to jump in. I'll go to you next.
I attended an organization, Canadian Muslim Women. It was their annual general meeting, and there were Jewish women and Muslim women working together, coming together to explore different concepts that connects them. I also went to a beautiful event called Heart to Heart, where Palestinian teenagers and Jewish teenagers came together and they camped together, and they went to, it started in Israel and it went to Northern Ontario, and then they talked about their experience, their common humanity. And that is a very, very good way to start with our young people, so that, or older people, to find the common ground, to say to each other that we are all one people. And there are so many of these examples, so let us foster them, support them, because there are people in each of their organizations that will not attend. We want to find those bridge builders and say that you are our hero, you're our pioneer, let's support them more, because best way to deal with hate is through harmony, understanding, and support of each other.
Thank you, Ms. Chow. Mr. Tory.
Well, I would just like to say, first of all, that I think everybody in this room agrees that the kinds of statements that Ari referred to are statements we don't accept coming from anybody. And I think we've got to then decide, okay, fine, we're going to turn the page and we're going to work going forward to try and do what we talked about in each of our answers at the beginning, which is to find ways to do that. And you know, I took a risk one night when I was privileged to be honored by as the honoree at the Negev dinner a couple of years ago, and I said at that dinner that there was no community that understood better the sting of stigmatization and discrimination and stereotyping than the Jewish community, because of the history that you've had, your community and your predecessors over the years. And I asked for your help, as I will tonight, as I will on the 28th of October, to help with some of what's been going on as well as we speak. Yes, with the Jewish community on an ongoing basis, we've all referred to that, but also with the Muslim community, the black community, who themselves are experiencing stereotyping and stigmatization. And I will be inviting you, as we turn the page and move forward, to join me in making sure that we find that there is no place for any of that in this city that we call home. I think that's what we should focus on tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tory. We're going to move on to our fourth question now. Mr. Tory will have 3 minutes to address this to begin with. The question is, whoever becomes mayor will still only have one vote on city council. If elected, how do you intend to gain councillors' support for your agenda? 3 minutes.
Well, I'll start off by just reminding us of a little bit of history. The rules have been more or less as they are for some considerable period of time. And we have seen mayors taking the right approach with the city council who have actually got an awful lot done. They've got an awful lot of their agenda implemented, and they did it under the same rules and the same reality you just referred to, where that mayor, whoever it was, Mr. Eggleton, Mr. Crombie, Ms. Hall, and others, had one vote and had a certain number of councillors, in some cases 44, as it is at present, other councillors to deal with. And I think, like a lot of other places in life, you know, David Soknacki and I had an interesting exchange when he was still running with us, and he said something about, well, John, it's different than being a CEO. And I said to him, well, David, actually it isn't really, because when you're a CEO, how often did you ever, I said to David, how often did you ever give an instruction or an order? What you did was, you set a direction, you set out a plan, you built a team, and then you worked in building that team to gain their support for the direction in which you wanted to take the organization. And what does that involve? Well, yes, it involves setting direction and being a leader, but it also involves an awful lot of listening, an awful lot of taking your own ideas, which you think are pretty good, and shaping them a little bit based on the input that you have from your teammates. And the people, as far as I'm concerned, that are going to be elected to the city council with me, 44 other people, they are elected too. And they are coming with their ideas, and they're coming with their own belief as to how we can best build up the city. And so I think it is my job, first and foremost, to respect them, not to call them names and not to act in a divisive fashion with them, to respect them. Secondly, to listen to them. And thirdly, to take that sense of direction I'm going to offer the city on transportation, on jobs, on housing, on how to keep taxes low and so on, and work with them to find a way to move us forward towards those objectives. I'll mention one other idea that I've had as part of what I repeatedly call One Toronto, which starts with a united city council, not agreeing on everything every day, not voting together on everything all the time, but united enough to move the city forward. Not left, not right, move the city forward. And that is that I would take the city council out to each of the old constituent municipalities each year, and I only called them that because that's what they were, but we still have civic centers, and I take the whole city council out to Etobicoke or to Scarborough and have them meet for a day. It might have to be an informal meeting because There are certain legalities and so on that might constrain it, and the technology of voting at City Hall. But they'll go there and listen to people from Scarborough for the day. In the afternoon, go out in groups of 2 or 3 and see things across Scarborough that they may not have seen, because the councillors from Etobicoke vote on stuff that is citywide. They're all councillors for the whole city. And I think by doing that, we can actually instill in people this sense that they are for the whole city, that it's all for one and one for all. But it starts with listening, and it starts with respect. And those in this room that have ever been a leader, a boss, a CEO, call it whatever you want, they understand that so. You don't get by giving people instructions. You get by building support for your ideas, building support for the direction in which you want to take the organization, in this case, the city that we love.
Thank you, Mr. Tory. Mr. Goldkind, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I thought Mr. Tory's answer was very fair, and I think it's pretty much on the mark, so let me expand on it a little bit with my vision of how I would do it. Becoming the mayor and being the mayor, different than the last 4 years, is not about being king, and it's not about being queen. It's about working with 44 people who may disagree with you every single day. Well, that is my day job. I negotiate in very, very difficult ways with people who are inclined to not agree with me. But you know what you do when you do that? You make sure it's a win-win for both people. You offer something because you know that will make somebody else be more inclined to work with you. You all know in this room, and I bet you many in this room are here in one camp or another, Ms. Chow, Mr. Ford, Mr. Tory, but you know that on October 28th, not the 27th, on October 28th, there will be a significant number of councillors who, when Mr. Tory, Ms. Chow, or Mr. Ford say jump, those councillors will be ready to say how low. I say it's time for a fresh start. It's time for a rethink. Let's not have the next mayor be chosen as a referendum on the Fords. Let's let that go. Let's start anew. The other thing that I will say, and this is very important to me, and I announced this when I launched my run, you cannot have a council in a city that's full of NIMBY, and not in my backyard, if you know what that means, where it's everybody out for themselves. You cannot have a council that is working for the best interests of all Torontonians unless you have term limits. And without term limits, you don't have the fresh thinking and fresh blood that you need to renew this city and to make decisions that are best for the entire city, not just each ward. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Goldkind. Mr. Ford, you have 2 minutes.
There's few governments